The rain stopped just as I finished sanding the front porch. The smell of wet cedar wrapped around me like an old memory. Inside, I could hear the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. My mother's voice floated up the hallway, sharp and bright. "You really should rest, Lynn. This isn't a job for a woman." Her tone was sweet, but the edge underneath was steel. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stayed quiet. Every word from her felt like a test I was destined to fail. When I was little, she used to call me her clever girl. Now, every compliment carried a sting I couldn't ignore. I thought of my sister, Han, with her perfect life and perfect husband. Mom adored her, bragged about her like a trophy. For me, she had only instructions and corrections. Still, I told myself to be patient, to prove my worth with work. The house was old, cracked, and heavy with history. I had rebuilt the floorboards with my own money and hands. Every nail I hammered felt like a promise to my father. He had told me the house would be partly mine when it was done. Those words kept me going through every late night and sore wrist. But lately, I started to notice the little signs of betrayal. Receipts missing from drawers. Muttered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Han's new plans for the living room, drawn on my blueprints. The sense of being a guest in my own work grew heavier each day. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the yard lights shimmered over the wet grass. Mom entered quietly, wearing that careful smile. "You work too much, Lynn. Maybe you should let a man handle it." I almost laughed, but it came out like a sigh. "This is what I do, Mom. It's my profession." She tilted her head, pity in her eyes. "Still, it's not a real career like Han's husband has." The words hit harder than any hammer blow. For her, what I built with my hands meant nothing. I stared at the teacup, watching the steam fade. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted quietly. A boundary I had always kept soft began to harden. When she left the room, I opened my laptop. I started photographing every corner I had restored. I saved receipts, contracts, and even voice memos. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. If they wanted to pretend my work didn't matter, I'd show them proof. But proof was cold comfort against the ache in my chest. I had come home to help, to belong, to rebuild us. Instead, every board I nailed down felt like sealing my own distance. The house looked beautiful, but it no longer felt like home. When I turned off the light, the silence pressed against my ribs. Outside, the rain began again, steady and knowing. It sounded like the start of something I could no longer stop. The morning was quiet, too quiet for a house that used to breathe. I walked downstairs, hearing only the hum of the refrigerator. Mom had gone out early, leaving her laptop open on the table. The screen glowed faintly, a spreadsheet half filled with numbers. I told myself not to look, not to invade her privacy. But something in me already knew what I was about to find. The folder was labeled Property Transfer. My name appeared once, then a thick red line struck through it. Next to it, Han's name gleamed in bright yellow highlight. My throat tightened, as if the air had turned to glass. Another file read Renovation Costs, Gifted Labor. Every hour, every wall, every nail I had driven was listed as free. I scrolled until the screen blurred with tears I didn't feel fall. Years of work reduced to a footnote, a donation, a favor. They had been planning this since the beginning. All the polite smiles, the thank yous, the tea at night. Every gesture was part of the performance. My stomach churned as I searched for my bank statements. Then I saw it, my transfer for Mom's vacation fund. $18,000, rerouted to her personal account. My hands began to shake, but I forced myself to take photos. Evidence first, anger later. I saved every file to a hidden drive and closed the laptop. The room felt smaller now, like the walls knew my secret. I could hear footsteps in the hallway. Mom's voice drifted in, soft and casual. "What are you doing in here, Lynn?" I turned, clutching a glass of water to hide the tremor. Just needed a drink. She smiled, too smooth, too calm. Good, don't overwork yourself, we need you healthy. Her words slid across the air like oil over water. Behind her, I caught sight of Han's reflection in the mirror. She was listening, pretending to check her phone. Something electric passed between us, silent and sharp. When they left, I leaned against the counter, trembling. The betrayal burned deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just money or promises. It was being erased from my own story. Later that night, I sat at my desk with every document open. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, steady and mocking. I printed copies, slid them into an envelope marked keep. For the first time, I understood that love could be tactical. They hadn't destroyed me yet, but they had drawn the blueprint. And now, I was studying every inch of it. The next morning, I smiled when Mom mentioned selling the house. Her eyes flickered, searching for reaction. I gave her none. In silence, I built a plan brick by brick, like a wall around my heart. Whatever they took, they would not take my proof. I had spent 3 years building this house. Now I would rebuild myself and make sure they watched every step. The days passed like splinters under my skin. Every sound in the house made me flinch. A drawer closing. A footstep on the stairs. I started locking my tools at night. The padlock clicked louder than my heartbeat. They thought I didn't notice the missing receipts. Or the hammer moved from my box to the garden shed. But I did. Every small shift felt like a message. You don't belong here. You never did. One night I found my sketches soaked with coffee. The paper rippled, the ink bled like bruises. Mom smiled, holding the empty mug. How clumsy of me, she said. I stared at her, searching for the woman I once trusted. There was only calculation behind her eyes. I stopped confronting her. Instead, I installed cameras in silence. One in my truck. One in my bedroom doorway. I told myself it was for protection, not revenge. But deep down, I knew I wanted evidence. Truth was the only weapon left to me. When I wasn't fixing the house, I was documenting it. Every wall. Every corner. Every conversation that hinted at their plan. At the lumber yard, I met Mr. Fong, an old friend of my father. He looked uneasy when he saw me. Your dad came by, he whispered. He asked about all the materials you've been buying. For the first time in months, hope flickered. Maybe he was starting to see what was happening. That night, I searched Dad's old study for answers. Behind a row of dusty books, I found a shoebox. Inside were letters tied with faded blue string. They were addressed to Mom, signed by a man named Dung. The dates matched the years Dad was away at conferences. Each letter was soft, romantic, painfully detailed. One spoke of money transfers and secret weekends. My hands went cold holding the paper. So that was it. The perfect family I had been rebuilding was already cracked. The foundation had rotted long before I picked up a hammer. I sat there until dawn, surrounded by ghosts made of paper. By morning, I felt something new, not sadness, not rage. Clarity. They had built this house on lies. I had been patching their rot with my own hands. But now, I would rebuild on truth, even if it meant tearing it all down. I backed up every video, every photo, every letter. I created a folder titled Legacy. When I looked at the word, I almost laughed. Legacy wasn't something you inherited. It was something you carved from what was left. From that day, I worked differently. Quiet, efficient, deliberate. Each swing of my hammer was no longer for them. It was for me. For the woman who finally stopped asking for permission to stay. For the daughter who learned that some families must be rebuilt from the ground up. Thursday came wrapped in false warmth. The smell of roasted meat filled the house, heavy and sweet. I set my tools aside and wiped the sawdust from my hands. Tonight, they wanted a family dinner. I knew better. Mom stood by the table arranging white lilies. Her favorite flowers for show, not for love. "You'll behave tonight, won't you, Lynn?" she asked softly. "This house has caused enough drama already." I smiled without answering. My laptop rested on the counter beside me like a silent witness. When the doorbell rang, I heard my father's voice. It was lower than I remembered, tired but steady. He wasn't supposed to be here until next week. Mom froze, knife still in her hand. "Why are you here early, Min?" "I thought I should be," he replied, his eyes cold. We all sat around the table, the food untouched. The estate lawyer cleared his throat, sensing tension. Mom began her speech first, rehearsed and brittle. "Before we discuss anything, I want peace in this house." I opened my laptop and connected it to the TV. The screen lit up with folders named renovations, contracts, proof. "I'd like to present my contributions," I said calmly. Slides appeared. Photos of walls, floors, and receipts. Numbers, dates, appraisals. Each image hit like a nail through silence. Dad leaned forward, scanning the data. Mom tried to interrupt. She misunderstood. "Enough," he said, voice like a hammer strike. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Min, is this the agreement you emailed her?" Dad nodded slowly. "Yes, I promised her 30% equity." Mom's face drained of color. "That email was just a draft," she stammered. "No," I said. "It was a contract." Dad reached into his briefcase and placed a folder on the table. "I've been reviewing the accounts," he said. "Your transfers to Dung were never for medical expenses." The room fell silent. The ticking clock sounded louder than breathing. Han looked at Mom, eyes wide with disbelief. Dad continued, unshaken. "You took funds meant for Lynn's investment. You lied to all of us." Mom stood up, voice trembling between rage and fear. "You're siding with her, after everything I sacrificed." Dad didn't answer. He just looked at me, then at the lawyer. "This property will not be transferred without fair compensation." Han's husband shifted uncomfortably, his lawyer's mask cracking. Mom tried one last smile, brittle as glass. "We can fix this privately, Min." He shook his head. "For once, Patricia, we'll fix it truthfully." The lawyer began taking notes, documenting each statement. I watched Mom's confidence collapse, inch by inch. The woman who once controlled every room now looked small. I felt no victory, only release. For the first time, I wasn't the child asking to be seen. I was the builder, revealing what had been hidden under the floorboards. Truth, raw and heavy, filled the house like fresh cement. And as it set, I realized the foundation had finally shifted in my favor. The house was silent the next morning. Only the echo of last night's words lingered in the halls. Mom didn't come down for breakfast. Han pretended to scroll through her phone, eyes red and puffy. Dad had already left for work, leaving the truth behind like debris. I made coffee and waited for the next move. It came faster than I expected. By noon, Mom appeared in the kitchen, perfectly dressed, smile tight. "Lynn," she began softly, "we've all had time to think." Han stood beside her, voice trembling but rehearsed. "We want to make things right. Maybe a smaller share, 15%. Their attempt at diplomacy almost made me laugh. They weren't sorry. They were scared. I stirred my coffee slowly, the spoon clinking like a metronome. "That's generous," I said flatly, "considering you plan to erase me." Mom reached for my hand, her touch cold as marble. "After all I've done for you, you'll punish me like this." Her eyes glistened, perfectly timed tears. "This family doesn't need more division." I set down the mug and pulled my phone from my pocket. I've been recording our conversations since December. The blood drained from her face before I pressed play. Through the tiny speaker, her voice filled the room. "Once she's gone, we'll finally hire a real contractor. Han gasped, stepping back. Mom whispered, "You can't." "I already did," I said. "And there's more." Their lies replayed in digital clarity, every cruel word preserved. Garrett, Han's husband, entered halfway through the recording. His jaw tightened as he listened. "Patricia, you told me this was a misunderstanding," he said coldly. Mom's mask cracked completely. "I was protecting this family," she shouted. "No," I said quietly. "You were protecting yourself." Silence followed, sharp and absolute. I stood, feeling taller than I ever had in that kitchen. "You can keep the house," I said. "I'm done here." Han's voice shook. "What are you going to do?" I smiled faintly. "Build something that's mine." At that moment, the back door opened. Dad stepped in, holding a sealed envelope. His voice was calm but final. "I've signed my share over to Lynn, effective immediately." Mom's scream was almost a whisper. "You can't do this, Min." "It's already done," he said, turning away. She sank into a chair, her pride collapsing like wet plaster. I gathered my blueprints, my sketches, my camera drive. Each one, a piece of the truth they tried to bury. Before leaving, I paused at the fireplace I built last spring. I unscrewed the mantle, revealing the cracked stone beneath. "I'm not taking anything that isn't mine," I said softly. "I'm just no longer giving it away." Outside, the wind carried the scent of cedar and freedom. For the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. Behind me, the house creaked like an old confession. Ahead, the road waited, open, raw, unfinished. Just like me. The first morning in my new house smelled like sawdust and coffee. Light streamed through unfinished windows, soft and golden. I stood barefoot on the wooden floor I had sanded myself. Every creak sounded honest, every imperfection mine alone. The silence was different here, not empty but peaceful. I unpacked my tools before I unpacked my clothes. Work first, always. The workshop took shape faster than I expected. Shelves, benches, racks for lumber, all built from scrap I'd saved. I painted the sign by hand, Lynn Restoration Studio. It felt unreal seeing my name in fresh white letters. No one to question its worth, no one to claim the credit. Dad visited on the third day, carrying an old wooden box. "This was your grandfather," he said. Inside lay a brass marking gauge, polished and precise. "He'd want you to have it. You build like he did, with purpose." For the first time, I saw pride in his eyes instead of guilt. He helped me hang the sign on the workshop door. When he left, the space felt full, not lonely. Weeks passed, filled with sawdust, deadlines, and quiet satisfaction. Clients came, curious at first, then confident in my craft. I repaired staircases, restored porches, rebuilt dreams. The work healed something I hadn't realized was broken. Each project was a small piece of redemption. At night, I would sit on the porch, watching the city lights flicker. Sometimes I thought about the old house. The one that took my years, but taught me my worth. I didn't hate them anymore, not really. Hate was too heavy to carry. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the estate attorney. A formal settlement proposal, numbers and signatures. I read it once, then folded it neatly and set it aside. Money couldn't rebuild what they had torn down. But I would take it, not out of need but principle. That night, Dad called to confirm dinner plans. His voice sounded lighter, freer. "Wouldn't miss it," I told him. The next month, I stood on stage at the Restoration Awards. The plaque felt warm in my hands, real and earned. The host asked if I had family present. I looked at Dad in the front row and smiled. "My father is here," I said. "He's been my biggest supporter." Afterward, people congratulated me, offering business cards. I spoke about foundations, patience, and rebuilding from truth. No rehearsed charm, no pretending. Just strength shaped from survival. When I returned home, the shop glowed under the evening light. The logo on the wall caught the last rays of sunset. I placed the award beside my grandfather's marking gauge. Then I hung a photo of me and Dad beside it. The frame fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for years. I took a deep breath, smelling cedar, varnish, and new beginnings. For the first time, I felt completely at home. Not in a house built for others, but in the life I built for myself. The photo of me and Dad hung straight on the workshop wall. Sunlight touched the glass, turning it gold for a moment. I traced the edge of the frame with a dusty fingertip. The silence felt full, alive, almost sacred. Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and rain. It reminded me of that first winter on the old roof. Back then, I thought home was something you earned through approval. Now I knew better. Home was what you built when no one believed you could. My phone buzzed, a message from Han. Just 2 words, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time before turning off the screen. Some foundations weren't worth repairing. But forgiveness was a different kind of restoration. I walked to the open door and looked out at the street. The world felt wide, waiting unafraid. My hands were scarred, strong, steady. Everything I needed was already here. Behind me, the smell of fresh wood lingered. Ahead, the future stretched like a clean plank waiting for the first cut. And this time, every nail, every mark, every choice would be mine.